Thank you very much, Susanne Alban. Stay with us for a couple of minutes, and Karen Hirsch-Ernst, if you would come down as well, that would be perfect. So we can go through your questions. Please come to my side. Yes, so I think both cameras can see all of us and the audience can as well. Perfect. So we have, in fact, questions from the audience concerning your talks. So I might start with the first one that is on your talk, and it says, is there any concrete evidence to assess piperine in pepper different compared to food supplements? Piperine uptake from pepper is high compared to most food supplements, and I am only aware of speculations if and why there are differences. This complicates assessment and judgment with regard to Article 14 of legislation number 178, 2002.
Yes.
I think, let me give you that.
Yes, thank you very much. Piperine indeed constitutes a major ingredient in peppercorns, up to, I think, about 6% in peppercorns. The difference between the use of peppercorns or the use of pepper in food and the use of food supplements with isolated piperine is that in the supplements we can expect the piperine to be a bolus or to be ingested as a bolus, and that the piperine is concentrated. And so we have relatively high concentrated doses applied as a bolus. While by ingesting peppercorns or using pepper as a spice, you are not only exposed to piperine, but other substances in the peppercorn, and there will be matrix effects of the other food that the pepper is combined with. And this would be expected to influence, for example, the bioavailability of the piperine in the digestive tract. So it's probably not the same. It should be differentiated from one another.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question online. I think both of you might be able to answer this. I would like to know, what are the criteria that make you initiate a risk assessment on plant or substance? Is it a signal from literature, reported adverse reactions, how many cases to perform a risk assessment? I remember Jacqueline Steenbergen yesterday mentioned that the Dutch authorities are more or less dependent on third-party hints, say like, hey, there might be a possible danger. How is it in Germany? Would you like to answer?
I can provide some information. In the case of the BFR, we are often requested by the ministry or by bodies of risk management to perform risk assessments. On the other hand, we can also self-task. If we follow the literature and see that there is an upcoming issue, then we might follow this issue and perform a risk assessment. So there are different triggers.
Is there anything like, we look especially at advertisements in front of the 7 p.m. news or anything like that? It's just like, when you say like, oh, there's a trend coming up, there is this influencer girl or boy promoting something and it's going really good on the internet. Is that a trigger too?
Well, it might be a trigger, especially for people concerned with food surveillance. The food surveillance authorities would probably be following these issues. Also, the consumer protection organizations are very, very closely following these trends. And of course, there are discussions between these different institutions, and also many impulses to assess certain substances are brought up by representatives of the food surveillance agencies in Germany. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question. Due to the sparse data in the literature and insufficient quality control, such a risk assessment seems to be likely looking for a needle in straw. This is particularly critical when there is little animal or human data. So, should the evidence be reversed in order to hold manufacturers and importers accountable? In Germany, there is also no registration of side effects or such superfoods and dietary supplements as was introduced, for example, by ANSYS in France. Shouldn't nutrivigilance also be established throughout the EU? What do you think?
This is clearly a question for the risk management. And so any statement I would make would be my personal opinion, but I think...
Give us your personal opinion.
Well, I'm here for the BFR. So.
But you're an expert.
Yeah, right. But in any case, of course, it would make sense if we had additional information from a nutri-vigilance system, for example, then this would complement the information that we have on other substances, in that we would have cases. I mean, it all depends on the cases. In many cases of adverse effects or adverse events that are described following food supplement ingestion, the conditions are not well defined. So sporadic cases might be reported to the BVL, and we might be informed by this, and we take note of these cases, but often we don't know which amount of a certain supplement was ingested. Often it's not clear whether other substances were ingested, and often the people affected also display underlying conditions. But nevertheless, this information, I think, would be extremely valuable if we had a more systematic nutri-vigilance system. I think it makes sense.
Would you agree, Susanne Alban?
Yes, I would support this opinion, because it could also be increase awareness of the public, of the consumers, on potential risk by food supplements. Everybody knows about potential risk of our vaccines and is aware of that. But compared to the potential risk by food supplements, the risk by our vaccinations are quite low. And maybe a more systematic nutri-vigilance could help to improve also the safety of food. And it's strange when I hear that risk assessments are started by rules, and this is completely different in the field of medicinal products. When there are a certain number of sporadic reports on potential risks in the pharmacovigilance, then there are mathematical algorithm how the risk assessment has to proceed, and in order to identify a signal, and then to manage the signal and to identify the real risk and to manage the risk. And this is a fully regulated procedure, and maybe a small adaptation could be helpful.
Thank you very much. We have another question coming in. I would like to know what compounds you are looking for if you are going to characterize ADME or botanicals. Since most of the compounds occur naturally as part of the diet, how do you differentiate between the different origins? Anybody wants to comment on that?
Well, maybe if you're looking at a single substance and it's the same chemical, then I think it doesn't matter whether it occurs naturally or whether it is synthesized. But if you are dealing with an extract containing a certain substance, then there might also be other substances, other constituents in this extract, and they should also be taken into account. So when assessing such as extracts, we need to know actually what is the composition, which solvents have been used for the extraction, what are the concentrations of individual constituents. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Oh, yes. We start up there, and you're number 2.
Thank you very much. I would like to add upon the very first question that we heard about piperine exposure by pepper. I absolutely agree that, of course, there will be matrix effects, and the bolus intake that we have in the toxicology studies is much different from the situation of a continuous intake by food. But the difficulty that I see is that there are many examples, and maybe it's even the regular case for many other food ingredients or contaminants that in risk assessment we do this extrapolation. We use bolus data from isolated compounds, and then we use that for the real world food ingredient situation where we have continuous intake with a matrix. Could you comment on that? And a second question would be, does the BFR plan to assess the risk of piperine intake from pepper?
I think indeed it is important to take matrix effects into account. And there have been other instances where this aspect has been discussed by the BFR. For example, in the assessment of isoflavone preparations. There was a trend, luckily this trend is not very pronounced anymore, but there was a trend to use isoflavones in food supplements for the purpose of alleviating menopausal symptoms. And in these cases, these were concentrated food supplements. And isoflavones were promoted quite aggressively as natural remedies for problems during menopause and so on and so forth. And one of the arguments was, well, look at the Asian women and they are consuming so much more isoflavones than the European women, and they have less problems with menopause and so on and so forth. But again, we were in those days considering that perhaps it does make a difference whether you were consuming the isoflavones traditionally and with your usual diet, or whether you are using concentrated food supplements, and whether these supplements are being used by women who are not generally accustomed to ingesting high amounts of isoflavones. So I think this is a general aspect that has to be kept in mind. And of course, this is not systematically assessed in the courses of risk assessment, although in some risk assessments it does pop up as one of the aspects, that it perhaps makes a difference whether the supplement is consumed together with a diet containing a lot of fat or things like that. So there are aspects that do influence the efficacy.
And the second part of the questions, are you planning anything on piperine in peppers?
Well,
maybe.
We would like to follow this aspect. It all depends on the resources we have, yeah.
May I ask a question on that? Why does it make sense? Because if piperine is used in form of pepper, we have a very, very low amount compared to the whole meal we consume. And so exactly this would be for me against an argument to assume any risk by piperine used by a usual meal. So I would say there are other tasks to be answers to questions to be answered. But I have also a question on piperine as you and as an expert. Piperine is also used to increase the availability of curcumin. And with the suggested increase of the bioavailability, the upper intake level would be exceeded. And experimentally, if you need a positive control for any assay you perform in the lab, you can always use curcumin. It does react with everything. And so I would like to have your opinion on the potential risk and the benefits of this bioavailability enhancement.
I think that this does pose a general risk. I mean, intentionally ingesting piperine to boost the bioavailability of other substances, because it is not confined only to curcumin, but also to many drugs. And yeah, so I think it's very plausible to be very cautious about food supplements containing concentrated piperine. I mean, the question is, how can you foresee to what extent the bioavailability would be influenced? I think this is very, very difficult, and this is not something which can be assessed by the consumers themselves. So I think there's really a big potential for maybe eliciting higher levels of a certain substance in the body than you want to have there.
Thank you very much. Your question.
Yeah, my name is Peter Nick, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, and I would have a question, a comment, and then a question. The comment is directed to Susanne Alban. The question may be directed to the BFR. So the comment is, a lot of problems arise because the nomenclature of traditional naming the plants is different from that what we think it should be. And there is a lot of mix-up. And just you mentioned the example of cinnamon capsules. We have assessed this recently and found out that there are about 1,000 cinnamon species around. And those that are traded, there are many of those used, and some of them are very high in coumarin. And if you take your capsules as prescribed, you can easily overdose your coumarin you need every day. You don't need it, but okay. So that's a real problem. Now we cannot do much about such things that are imported from China or from India. You have shown this example, and that's now my question. But we can do something about the food supplements that are produced here in Europe. And one point would be, is there an assessment about the raw materials that are used for those supplements? Because my experience with many companies is there is no awareness whatsoever what they are actually processing there. They don't care. Cinnamon is cinnamon. And there should be something done about it. I'm not sure in which authority this should be located. Probably not the BFR on the local level. In the States, we have in Baden-Württemberg, we have the chemisch-veterinärtechnische Überwachungsämter. In the meantime, they are sensitized. I don't know about the other states in Germany. I don't know about the other countries, but it's a big problem. We should work also on the raw materials before they come to Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment and for your question. For time reasons, I eliminated the coumarin aspect of cinnamon, but this was my thought at the end. The quality control and the quality requirements should be improved, but this would need a change in the European law. And also the implementation, and this would cause a lot of additional costs. For example, we have each year about 50 to 40 new drug substances are approved. But in Germany, 6,000 new food supplements are brought to the market each year. And so I completely agree that's hard to control all these products. And so I would be also interested on the answers of BFR, of Dr. Hirsch-Ernst, concerning these problems.
Thank you very much, Susanne Alban. Do you want to comment as well?
Yes, well, I think Susanne Alban has summarized that very well, but regarding the origin of substances used in food, what I know from the cases that we have assessed is that often certificates of analysis are produced. So documents are produced, but these are documents provided by the producers of the chemicals or the food ingredients. So we don't have laboratory analysis reports from analysis performed here in Germany.
Thank you very much. I just mentioned Annika Wagner, unfortunately, is ill, and since we heard so much about risks now and that we have to be aware and that there are dangers coming up, there was one aspect in her talk that we are missing out at the moment, that is the benefits. Is there any data, anything with proven evidence that there is a superfood that is just good for us? What do you say, any one of you?
May I comment on that? If we consider that according to the Ernährungsreport, that Germans do not consume enough fruit and vegetables, I would see some benefit in the marketing of superfood, because it may lead to an increased consumption of vegetables and fruits. And so in general, it could have also health benefits.
Do you have a certain example where you know some data?
Yes, well known. And you see it in each supermarket. There is a huge increase in the consumption of red berries. And this is, and also avocados. Avocados are superfoods, and here you have to think about whether it's really generally good to buy this avocado, but there is a clear increase in the consumption.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much, Susanne Alban, and thank you very much, Karen Hirsch-Ernst, for giving us the opportunity to dip a little deeper into the discussion. Thanks very much.